Hello and welcome to the Mighty Oak Show. Today, glad to have you with us. It is good to share this time with you, of course, and excited about today's show. But before we jump into today's show, real quick, if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, take time to subscribe to the channel. Perhaps you're listening at Mojo 50 or via podcast. Thank you for doing that. We love our partners. But take some time later on to go to YouTube, look us up, Mighty Oak Show. We're Mighty Oaks Foundation. You'll find us there. And again, that lets you, if you subscribe and then hit the notification bell, this is my kids tell me to do all these things all the time because they watch YouTube constantly, right? So this is where I learned all this. Hit the notification bell. That lets you know when more content comes online, and we would love to share that with you and look forward to the opportunity to do that. Now, if you watched our show last week, you know that I had my wife here, and she runs, oversees, directs our women's program, and all that's involved in that. We talked about that for about an hour last week, so I think we could have gone on longer than an hour. And today we want to talk a little bit more about not our women's program, but women serving in the military, married to someone serving in the military, perhaps other issues that folks on the women's side would deal with.
Yeah.
And to do that, we have with us Shannon Morell. Shannon has served in the United States Navy.
Yes.
Good to pass. The United States Navy. But married a Marine.
I did.
Saw the light of day, married the Marine. So she served in the military, was married to someone in the military, and now in her professional life is a licensed marriage and family therapist.
I am.
And also one of the key team leaders for the Mighty Oaks Women's Program. Been here since the beginning. Teaches on all kinds of stuff. One of the things Shannon teaches on is post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
And I wanted to talk about that. So Shannon, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
And this is, I've talked several times about having you on, and it finally worked out.
Oh.
So it's awesome. Tell us your story a little bit. You're from Louisiana.
I am. I'm from Louisiana.
Yeah. So how'd you get from Louisiana to California? Just run down that road. It's a long road.
It's a long road. So
yeah.
we'll cliff notes, of course. But yes, I'm from St. Francisville, Louisiana. It's a small town right outside of Baton Rouge. I think it's important to really discuss why I joined the military.
Yeah. It's funny how different that is for every single person, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And so I just came from, like I said, a small town. And so there was not a lot of growth for me there. I grew up in domestic violence. It was very heavy in our home. A lot of alcoholism. So, and then, you know, I had brothers who were getting in a lot of trouble, and I just really saw that wasn't going to be beneficial for me being there.
Right.
I just really knew there was nothing really for me there.
Yeah.
And so in my high school years, I actually joined Navy ROTC.
Huh?
Because I knew, I'm going to go to the military. Because of course I saw the commercials.
Right.
I saw the Marine Corps commercials. They were slaying dragons and stuff. So I was
You didn't want to slay dragons?
I did, but the Navy offered me more than the Marine Corps did. So.
Typical.
But you know, so just really knew I needed to get out of that environment. It was a lot of trauma. Constant fear because you don't know what's going to happen when you live in alcoholism and domestic violence. And so going into my senior year, I had already signed with the Navy, so I did everything I needed to do. I knew I was going, really was excited about that. So 17 years old I signed, 18 years old I left. Yeah. So
we've said this before a few times. I wonder how many recruiters have saved young people from bad situations. I mean they don't go into it to do that, and you meet their quota, but I think, man, many recruiters are responsible for pulling folks out of bad situations.
And I'll say, if my recruiter is watching from way back in the day, I had a great recruiter.
Yeah.
I was really set up for success, very informed. I actually was honor grad out of boot camp, so that was pretty awesome. Yeah. But so I ended up but I went to the military because I knew that's what I was going to do. That was going to help me get from where I was, because I saw the military as a way out, a place to grow, get out on my own, and definitely not have to depend on my parents financially at all. And that was a real goal of mine, because I also saw what it looked like when people had to struggle financially, and that financial hold that was on people, and you were just really stuck.
Was that where you grew up, was that a poor area or a?
It's a little confusing because you have poor areas, but you also have well-off middle-class areas.
Right.
So it just, we were, I'd say more low income. I wouldn't say poor. Sure. We had food and all of those things. We definitely used assistance, government assistance, but it was just, you're kind of stuck in a sense.
Yeah.
So I chose to go to the Navy.
What did you do in the Navy?
So I started off as a deck seaman going in because I actually didn't do so great on the ASVAB. But
Even though you were the honor grad.
Well, out of boot camp, I was honor grad. But, I was just, myself felt I wasn't a great tester. So I took the first ASVAB and I was like, all right, I'll take the score because I just didn't want to do it again.
Right.
And so, but I ended up being a deck seaman, which actually wasn't so bad.
So what is that for all of the non-Navy people?
Okay. We do all the labor.
Okay, right.
But I did learn some great skills for that time. I mean, can you imagine being 18, 19 years old, steering a ship? I was on an amphib that was, say, 2.5 football fields long. So, with over 2,000 Marines and sailors on. So I was 18 doing that. So it's pretty neat. But you're needle gunning, you're painting, you're doing all those things. But then when I became an E4, I actually became a Navy journalist. At the time.
A journalist?
No yes, I did.
Yeah,
and I actually used to do this on the ship all the time.
Oh, very cool.
But yeah, so I was a Navy journalist for the military. Really thought I was going to stay.
Yep.
But I met a Marine.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, that happened. And so we absolutely couldn't be stationed together. And so made a decision. I just did my, first enlistment and went with my spouse, my husband, who's a Marine, because we couldn't be together.
Right.
So he loved it. I liked it. So it's kind of how we made those decisions moving forward. So, yeah.
That's crazy. How long were you in the Navy?
Only did 4 years. So,
okay.
Yeah. 4 years.
Wow.
In the Navy.
I remember, so I was on one deployment where I was on a ship, a UDP out of Okinawa. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom or whatever, right? And seeing people just 2 a.m. cleaning stuff and doing things, and felt so sorry for those kids. Felt so sorry. I was so happy I wasn't in the Navy.
Yeah, you worked 24. I was a night shift, so I'd go in for 8 p.m., record. I also did even though I became a journalist, I actually still had the credentials to do special evolutions as a Lee Helms, and so we're the ones who do all the speed changes for the ship for replenishments, pulling into ports. Yeah, so I was still doing that while I became a journalist on the ship. So everybody's got to work.
How old is your oldest?
He's 17.
17.
Now,
okay, so I have a 20-year-old and a 19-year-old, and sometimes I think about them in the context of what we did when we were 18 and 19 and 20 years old.
Oh, they don't have to.
Driving ships and stuff, though? Can you imagine that?
Oh, yeah. My son barely wants to drive his car, so.
How long your husband has retired from the Marine Corps.
He has.
How long were you guys married before he retired?
Oh, that's a good question. So we've been married going on 17 years, 18 years now. Yeah. We've been married 17, so 18. So I would say he just 15 years as a spouse to a Marine.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, how does that, you see people who serve in the military and spouses of those who serve in the military. Rarely is it, do you have both experiences? Did the one set you up better for the other one, or was it just a different thing altogether?
It was, I think there was positives and negatives because I knew a lot of what he was going to do because actually we met due to, we were the first ship, the first responders to September 11th. So I actually met him on that deployment. Our ship was in Darwin, Australia at the time for a Westpac. And so I kind of knew what his experience were in a sense. I mean, he's a Marine, they're going out, but it was a positive negative because there's that piece of, he's leaving in his uniform and I'm like, I used to do that.
Right.
And, I'm at home with kids and, now I see it as a great benefit of having the opportunity to be home with my children. But at the time, of course, and I was a young parent, it got a little like, oh, what's my purpose? So you saw him going out all happy and gun-ho and I'm like, all right, well, I'll be changing diapers today. So.
And eventually, though, you transitioned into counseling and
I did.
The work that you do now. Can you talk about that a little bit? How you, because that's a pretty hard turn.
Well, a little. I think that's what really drew me to getting out, though, was really thinking about what my future was going to look like. And just what they had available to me at the time wasn't there. So I pursued, which is awesome that the military was able to pay for my education. So when I talked earlier about that financial, hold, I didn't have that. So that's amazing. So that's one of the things, if anything, I appreciate, being able to serve and get those benefits.
Yep, that's great.
So, so I knew I always wanted to be in the helping fields, counseling and supporting families and teenagers, and so just really in that growth area, and especially around trauma. And in fact, it actually helped me understand my family better as well, which definitely has helped in forgiveness and just really meeting people where they are and understanding even families as they come along. Like, I've been there and I know what this looks like. And so it was a bit of a turn. I think everything kind of led me to where I am, because my whole goal going in was to do 20 years. That's all I knew. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do 20 years in the military, because you know.
You didn't have something after the military.
No, and I always knew I wanted to do counseling. I wanted to do the officer program, but this just made it even, better. So I was able to get my bachelor's in social psychology. Then I got a master's in counseling psychology that the military paid for. Yeah,
and you're using it now in the military.
I am. So I work, my full-time job, I actually work on Camp Pendleton in a command, CLR 15. So I'm an embedded behavioral health prevention specialist there.
That's a big title.
It is a big title. So we're there to look at all preventative efforts when it comes to suicide behavior, drugs and alcohol, domestic violence, child abuse, anything that would cause those Marines, to lose their rank, get in trouble. I mean, we're there to look at what is prevention, to keep these things as much as possible, give them the education, everything they need to be successful. And so I really enjoy that job. So
our organization's had many opportunities, several opportunities to work with your team on Camp Pendleton because of the work that you guys do. Because it's not just about you providing the counseling, often it's providing the resources that are needed. Yeah. So, you have two experiences. So what are some things from your time as an active duty service member that you can reflect on, or maybe some experiences that happened in your time? And I don't know if there were any, but some things that you kind of draw from as you're working with active duty men and women now.
Oh yeah. So I think one of the things, and it's such an awesome phrase because we use it here at Mighty Oaks, is suffer well. So oftentimes, because I went in with this idea that everyone looks out for each other and we have each other's back, and you do.
That's what the recruiters tell you,
of course. And that's what you see. It's about the family, and of course when you come from trauma or broken families, you want family. And so you come in and you have this idea, and you can get really jaded from some of your experiences. But I definitely, even with the Marines now that I talk to them, like, do you know what suffer well means? It's, control what you can control. So sometimes you might not get the best leader. The environment might be quite bleak, but show up on time. Do your part.
Control what you can control.
Control what you can control, which is your part, your uniform, your haircuts, having integrity, because no one, no matter, say if you don't have the best leader, no one can take integrity away from you. And so that's just really what I found for myself, because I did set for myself as a young sailor. I had a rule: I don't drink, and I didn't drink on purpose, because growing up in alcoholism, I was just like, I saw things, people were out of control. You saw them do some really mean and nasty things to people. And so for myself, that's what alcoholism was. It's associated. If you drink, this is how you act. I see it a little different now, but it helped me because that was something I set in stone for myself, is I will not drink. And I didn't, because I wanted to make sure I could control what I could control. And I saw people, a lot of really big out of control. So that's why that was really helpful for me. Having something to lean on, definitely doing my part. No one can take that away from you. And taking advantage of it.
So life, we like to believe it's more ups than it is downs, but the reality is there's a lot of downs.
There's a lot of downs.
A lot of difficult times. The whole world's going through a weird time right now. But throughout life, we go through difficult times. How important is it to suffer so that you can learn how to suffer well?
Oh, that's good.
I ask good questions.
Yeah, you do ask.
No,
that's
I really
a really
do.
good question. No, I think suffering grows us. I think if you don't have many experience of anything, you're just kind of coasting. And I think the more, and no one wants to suffer, at all, but that's what discipline, in a sense, discipline is. That's what we do in boot camp. We suffer to be better. At the end of the day, they talk about breaking you to make you better, to grow you. And so I think it's necessary, and you do see a lack of this in some of our young people not having much adversity. And that could be even just working a hard job, or, playing sports that causes you to really,
doing something difficult.
Yeah, doing something difficult. And so I think you absolutely need that. Because as the more you go through, it gives you this understanding that I can get through things. And so that doesn't mean it has to be super traumatic, but I think there has to be something that stretches us. And like I said, that could be, sports, that can be a job, at a young age, responsibilities that you have to show up for, you might want to sleep in when you can't. And all those things grow you. And it causes you to understand what suffering well means. It's like, all I can do is my part. Like, I can't control someone else, but I can show up on time, because you do see, and I've seen it where, say it's a group, and I'll say Marines because that's who I work with. One Marine seems like he's getting away with something. And so the other Marine's like, oh, well, he doesn't have to show up. Then I don't have to show up. And they don't realize what's happening on this side. And I'm like, no one else should cause you to change what you're there to do.
That's right.
So it makes a lot of sense.
I've talked about the concept of redemption before, and as Christians, this means something really big to us. But that word redemption, it means to make something valuable out of something worthless. And when I think about suffering and the idea of suffering, it's amazing how many people live and experience suffering to simply get to the other side of it. Well, there's no redemption in survival. And I think there's something to be said for understanding that when those moments of suffering or difficulty or trial come, you can redeem them. You can make something valuable out of something that seems worthless. If you'll not find the good in it. I think that's a trite, kind of silly saying, like, find the good in it. Well, sometimes there's not good in it, but there's always growth in it.
Absolutely.
And it's focusing on what you can focus on.
Absolutely.
I think so many people miss that. The fact that what you're dealing with right now, I think, again, this is a silly example, but we're living through it right now. People are counting the days until somebody tells them they can go back to whatever and do whatever. Well, there's so much to be learned from a time like this. And that's suffering well and really controlling what you can control. So I want to come back to that, because I think when we get to the conversation about trauma, that's really essential, right? So on the other side, because you have your own private practice,
I do.
Where you do marriage and family counseling.
I do.
How has your experience as a military spouse, and we could probably spend all day talking about this, but the military spouse deals with things that probably people are not aware of a lot of the time, in ways that they're not aware of. It's a very layered relationship, I think. How has your life as a military spouse helped you to counsel families who are struggling, going through things?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest pieces for me being a military spouse was, in a sense, especially early on, and probably it tied in from my background of being in the military, is really trying to make sure my husband had everything he needed, to such a degree that I kind of lost a lot of myself. Even though I was going to school, but a lot of my time was wrapped up around, okay, what does he need? Or waiting for phone calls when he deployed. And those are good things, but you can do so much of it that it's like days are going by and you're like, oh, it's 3 months. What am I,
and your whole identity gets wrapped up in what your spouse is doing.
Absolutely. And so, but then you get to a point where you're unhealthy. Your mental, your emotional, your physical, even your spiritual, because I know spiritual is very important for me, my faith, and you start just kind of pushing those things to the side. You're not taking care of yourself. You're not eating well. You're not sleeping well. And, of course, you add children to the mix of that. And, of course, it's about sacrifice, because you see your spouse sacrifice. And so you think, well, I need to sacrifice myself, too. And I don't think people consciously think of that, but that's really what you're doing. And so some things I've been able to help even young spouses right now, or people who come in for counseling, is just, how do you take care of you to be able to pour into others? And that's how you lose a lot of that, because we would have service members who'd have to come home because their spouses weren't doing well, or they couldn't handle certain things, and they were trying to do it all on their own. And so another part too is definitely building a network, of people. Especially for me, it was women, and a lot of my network even now are the women from Mighty Oaks. I can call them for really anything. And having that support system, and knowing that you don't have to do this alone. And I think that's the biggest part, is when people isolate themselves away. So, it could seem simple in a sense, but people feel like I have to have it together. I have to give so much to others, and then they're not taking care of themselves, and then they isolate away, which is very unhealthy to do. So just those types of tips, living through it myself. Like, I got this, and like, no, I don't have this.
Right.
And definitely taking advantage of the resources and help. We have so many resources out there, and getting out in the community. And I find even now a lot of our younger spouses aren't, doing any of that. So,
how do some of the things that you deal with military families? What are some of the commonalities, the things that translate to just people?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people who would watch this or listen to this, they're sympathetic toward the military, but maybe they haven't lived that, but they would struggle in many of the same ways.
Oh yeah. So I think one of the biggest areas, and we talk about even that struggle piece, is that trauma difficulties didn't just start here in the military.
Right.
And I think, we have that sympathy for the military, and we should, because there's a lot of sacrifice, a lot of leaving the family.
Sure.
But I think my passion, and I don't know if this answers much of your question, is though mainly the reservist families is a huge, are impacted a lot, because they're out there, they don't have the resources.
Same networks, right?
Same network. Right. They go away, they go to war, do all these workups, and then they go right back into the environment, and everybody expects them to just adjust. Where, more the active duty, we have so many resources around us. And so, I don't know, in a sense, I think every family, even active duty, definitely we should, love on them, care for them. But we have a lot of families struggling, even in our civilian communities, to make things happen. So I just, in a sense, to me, just be compassionate to really everyone. So. And
I think taking responsibility for yourself and your family to find those connections, right? I think, for me and our family, I think is why church is so important.
Yes.
Because we can plug into a community of people who can support what we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, support what we do. Support us as we do the things we do. Maybe they don't support what we do, but they can support the things that we do. Right. Trauma is a big issue, of course, in the military, but it's a big issue outside of the military. Right. And I think, you just mentioned this, that a lot of the trauma that people in the military deal with started before. Right. It's the family trauma, it's the other stuff. And so, I like to say that trauma is not reserved for the veteran. Right. We think it is. We like to pretend like it is. This is about serving in combat, but it really is not a lot of the time. So can you spend a few minutes, we'll spend as much time, maybe more than a few minutes, talking about post-traumatic stress disorder. This is something that I was asked on a show last week. People are very curious about. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it is, clinically what it is, what it's not, and just how we deal with trauma, kind of generally. How do we help people who either are diagnosed, have not been diagnosed, people have struggled with trauma, they're overwhelmed by what's happened to them. Can you talk on that a little bit? What is post-traumatic stress disorder? What is it not? Right. And how do we help people with trauma?
Absolutely. So, in the simplest form, it really is a normal response to abnormal events that have happened, like a tragedy, witnessing an event. And what it does, it really gets in and it changes the way your brain works. And so it causes people to have experiences of reliving experiences, or they're not able to adjust to the everyday life due to that trauma or tragedy. And like you said, is absolutely right. It didn't start in the military. And in fact, we're seeing that, or from some of the research I've looked at, even in teaching this course for Mighty Oaks, is the compounding of it. Because you can have several people go to war, and yet not all of them come back with PTSD. And they're finding that the more trauma people have, it can be compounding. And of course, you have one event can cause it as well. So it really is. It really gets in there, and it causes people to really respond differently than their norm. And I don't say normal because people are so different, but their norm.
Their norm, whatever their baseline is.
Yes, absolutely.
Do people respond differently if it's one event that causes it, or if it's a series of events? Right. Do you look at that differently, or do you look at it the same?
I actually don't. I don't look at it any different because anything that's causing a person something to disrupt their everyday life. Yeah. Now they can't sleep. That can happen from one event. Right. Now, if it's prolonged over time, that definitely can get in there and cause that person to react different.
Prolonged, like something that happened, like abuse,
yes,
something that happens
they have
all
abuse,
the time.
exactly.
Right.
So you have that, something that happens exactly like abuse, and now they're reliving these experiences. They're scared all the time. The noises, then their senses start to kick, different things like smells will trigger. So now you're looking at different types of triggers that will cause that person to relive that event. And that's where a person could possibly be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. So it could be the prolonged events of trauma, violence, abuse, or one event. You don't look at it really any different, because it's now, what is that person, how are they responding? How are they reacting in their everyday life? What's their experience?
I talk to church people often, or people coming not from the military, and they'll say, how do I understand this? One of the phrases that's helped me is, it may not be a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, but one of the things that helps me is understanding that trauma is that event or series of events that pushes you beyond your ability to cope. So did a clinician diagnose you? It doesn't matter.
Right.
What we're dealing with are people who, for some reason, an event or a series of events have been pushed beyond their ability to cope.
Absolutely. I think that's a good way to explain it as well. And are they having a hard time, they can't cope, but are they having a hard time getting back to what their normal is? Do they have to change the way they live because of that trauma? So, that's really good.
What do you do with someone who's normal wasn't? I mean, kids grow up and they don't have a norm. They don't have a baseline, because their entire childhood into adulthood was abuse or whatever. How do you help someone get back to something that never was?
Right. That's actually a really good question, because it honestly will be based off of that individual, and I think we have to be so careful not trying to have this cookie cutter system for people. And it's just really meeting them where they are, because there's a lot of people who go through trauma who actually can cope, and they do well in coping, and they realize that it's not them, it wasn't their fault. Because a lot of trauma, and then there's stuff that happens that you just really, the responses, the way our brain has changed is just there, so even they might understand that this isn't my fault, but they're still having reactions.
There's a physiological change to your brain.
There is a physiological change to the brain. So I think what you can do for those individuals is just hear their story, right? You be compassionate. They actually have to get the right treatment, though. And when I say the right treatment, it can be, I can't say one specific treatment, but you can't just leave them out there, okay, good, thank you for telling me your story. But they will need support. And if that's, seeing a medical doctor or a therapist or exposure therapy, there's different type of modalities out there, but what do they need? But I will say, and just being honest, and I know we talked about this, is they also need that spiritual component that is so important, because when you're out there and you're living life and you think it's all on you, I'm this horrible person, I'm this bad person, and I know, we're not talking about suicide, but how much more likely is it for someone to take their life when they think everything is on me?
My fault.
It's all, and it could be your fault, but knowing that there's forgiveness, or knowing that you can grow from this, knowing this doesn't have to be your identity. And outside of faith and spirituality and, having a relationship with God, it's really hard for people to get to that place. Think about, it's all on me, and then I fail, and so I think that's a big piece. And I think that's a part that oftentimes we miss. We want to help people and tell them, and we give them all these self-help tools and say, you can do this, and you, it's on you. And then the minute they mess up, it's on me, and so I just failed. And they think they have to start all the way back over from point one, and I'm like, no, you don't have to start over. Start from here. Just keep going and moving forward. So just giving them realistic hope, support, meeting them where they are. Definitely, we don't ignore that they might need medical therapists, even medication for some people. And then we definitely, in all of it, cannot ignore a relationship, with God in this. So
I think that, along with that, the foundation of faith, not only does it give hope and direction and forgiveness, those things are so important. The identity piece is so important, right? But it gives it kind of sets the baseline for normal.
Right.
I think sometimes people are trying to hit a target they just they've just never been able to see. So their entire lives, particularly people coming through the military, I think a lot of people go into the military because they want some kind of normal. They want some kind of order. They want something that makes sense. And then particularly people that separate out of the military, they've never found it.
Right.
And so, I believe that often it's the faith foundation that sets kind of zero. And so as you're working through the other processes that are necessary to help someone, they have something to point at.
Absolutely. And you said it all very well, is that foundation, being in what is it in, and if it's only in yourself, how easy it is to fail.
Right.
But if I know I have a foundation in Christ and the principles and the teachings that tells me, the things I can do to move forward, and if I do fail, that I can get back up. And I think that's a part, even in our society, even in the military, because you can have a Marine for 15 years doing great, like for what you see, because of his work ethic. Okay, he's great at that. Or, she's great at that. They show up on time. And the minute they make a mistake, which a lot of times
over.
You can't afford a mistake, but you did this, or you got a DUI, or this, it's like, oh nope, you're horrible. And so, which puts it
we're done with you.
And it's part of, it's realistic too. We need people who are healthy and can, make good decisions, but we also, so many areas in that. And so they kind of move you on. And
your
it's
whole
like,
identity is wrapped up in that.
It is. And so if you think of my identity is wrapped up in this role or this position or this title, and I mess that up, or I get out, what else do I have?
What do I have?
Right.
Okay, so with that, and this is another piece to it.
Okay.
So saying that there is forgiveness, I can get back up, I can move forward. There's a physiological change perhaps in my brain, and some of that's good. We talk about this in our processes as we teach these classes, that some of the changes that take place in your brain, God created us that way, right? So that we would stay out of bad situations and so forth. But we respond poorly because of some of those things. Okay, so you can receive forgiveness from God. Some of it is physiological, some of it's emotional. A lot of things go into this. But none of that excuses a person from doing bad things.
Absolutely.
How do you reconcile all of that?
Oh yeah, it's a lot of sense, because what we're looking at as well is that you have thoughts, of course, and sometimes that can be skewed due to whatever the PTSD or the trauma of some sort if it's not diagnosed. And then we have feelings, and then the feelings part is like, oh, I feel bad, worried, mad, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, and oftentimes people with PTSD or people can have a response of anger or frustration, but then it almost seems like because I'm angry and frustrated, I get to act this way. I get to throw things.
Because something happened to me, it was out of my control.
Absolutely. And so it isn't. It really isn't an excuse for bad behavior.
Right.
And so if you're finding yourself in a place where I am acting out this way, and that's where you really need to ask for help. The first thing is safety. Like, am I keeping my family safe? And so recognizing that, okay, I don't know why I'm responding this way. I see where I can't control it, because if you were trying to and you're still doing it, then you can't control it. So it means I need to ask for help.
Yes.
I need to ask for support. I need to get into an environment that's going to teach me, talk to me, where I can start learning different behaviors. Because another part of that too is, say if you grew up in trauma, like I grew up in domestic violence, what did I see? People throwing things, breaking things, profanity.
That's your normal, right?
That's your norm. And so you add now more trauma or any type of military trauma or experience, then you react how you've learned. And so even outside of trauma or just the environment itself, we can learn different ways, different behaviors. So I think the main thing though, we have to teach even at a young age, anger, frustration, irritation, being even pissed off, is not bad. Those are feelings. They tell us stuff, and we associate those things to bad. So what people do is, I'm angry. Well,
that's bad.
It's bad, but I get to react this way.
Right.
And so it's really, I'm angry, I'm frustrated. So it's telling me something, but that doesn't give me the right to act out this way. I need to figure out why this is happening. And so we do know then, if people have been diagnosed with PTSD or any of that, and they're having these reactions and they're getting there faster because of what's happening in their brain. Okay, I'm angry, so that means I need to put things in place for when I'm angry, so I don't act out this way, hurt my family and hurt others.
That's good.
And it takes work.
Right.
You know, it's a lot of work, and it's how we choose to cope. You know, what are you choosing to cope with? And then once you start adding alcohol, drugs, all of these other components people use as a way to cope, this is now another layer that's going to be dysfunctional, because it'll never be healthy when you add those types of things on top of this. And I do see that a lot, where people have TBI or PTSD, but they're using alcohol to cope, and they're using drugs to cope, or pornography to cope, and now it's just doing more damage than help. And so there are better coping skills out there than those things. You know, and so
it's amazing to me how many conversations I've had where someone will say, "My life is a mess because of trauma."
Right.
And you look at them and go, "Your life is a mess because you're an idiot." Now, you wouldn't say that.
I would not.
But I could say that. Your life is a mess because when you started to struggle emotionally, when you started to have these problems, you started to drink too heavily. You started to do all those things that you just listed. That's why your life is a mess.
Oh yeah, and so I wouldn't say it's because you're an idiot.
Yeah, no, that's not the right way to say it.
I know, no, and that's, you know, that's fine. But what I would really ask is, well, tell me about it. How did that? And so what I get them to do is start breaking down for themselves, and then they get to tell me, oh, this is why. Right. And so because oftentimes we think, I hear your traumatic event, and I think that's why it's so important for myself. Yeah, I grew up in domestic violence. I've seen it. I went through the military. I've been to war. I've seen my husband struggle with his traumas and the experiences he's had. And I can sit there and go, okay, I get that. But there's a but. You don't have to stay here. And okay, let's talk about what you can do different. Let's put some things into practice. I get it. And oftentimes, if you're not used to that, you could hear the story and you could get so compassionate that you overlook the behaviors.
Right.
And it's like, okay, no, I get it, but let's work on what you're doing.
It's fine.
Yeah, oh no, it's like you keep doing that, it's going to get worse, you know. And so just really being real with people. And I'm finding that actually a lot of people like when you get real with them. That's why they're coming to see you.
I don't think a lot of people are honest with folks who are struggling.
I don't think so.
Particularly in the military.
Yeah. Because we think, well, that's just a part of their story, and we don't want to.
We excuse their bad behavior.
Absolutely. And you know what we allow as well, which we'll allow that military member to say to us, oh, you don't understand. You don't know. And well, it's like I don't have to understand trauma from the military, but I do understand there are traumas. There's traumas from car accidents, there's traumas from assault, you know, from domestic violence, abuse. So I won't say trauma is trauma, but people have that experience. So don't discount me trying to help because I know I didn't, because someone could say, well, you weren't a Marine, you know, and I'm like, well, that's true, but you know.
Not everybody can be a Marine.
Right. And so I think a lot of times when the service member, and this is where I think it would be really helpful for, if you're going for help, you need help, allow the person to help you. At least try, give them a chance. Because oftentimes that service member will come in very resistant because usually they're made, or an incident has happened, now they have to go.
Right.
But it's like, no, really take advantage of it and allow that person try to be open, and that's your responsibility. To be open and allow that person try to help you, because we could find negative in anything and say, oh, it didn't work. Well, what did you tell them? Did you tell them the truth? I can work with an individual all day, but they never told me, oh, I smoke weed every day. That's why I'm having my spouse is mad at me. And so it's like, so just be honest and allow the person to try to help you. And I think even the opportunity to sit and talk and share your story and allow someone to listen and be compassionate and maybe have some ideas of, you know, that you can do or work with you can help anyone. And you just have to allow it.
It's really interesting that in no other place in our lives would we say someone has to experience the exact same thing I experienced in order to help me. I go to a doctor and I'm having whatever issue. I don't expect that doctor's had every issue I would ask them about. But he's been trained. He's spoken to thousands of people just like me, and so he can help. And I think we need to go into it that same thing. I do think there's help. It is helpful, and this is part of what we do at Mighty Oaks. It's helpful to have someone who has the same background.
Oh yeah.
And that's why, you know, we have combat veterans, and we have spouses, and we have people who can speak to where you are directly. But that doesn't mean people who don't have your exact same experience should be discounted.
Absolutely. And I think it ties into something we spoke about a little bit ago, is when we suffer, outside of even that, when we suffer, we get to help someone else.
Right.
Our story, I mean, I think it just helps even more so that, yeah, I've been where you've been, and I'm several steps ahead, and I can help you, and you can see, because it is difficult if you see no one progressing, you know, if everyone's down, it is like, and we're, you know, you have people on the outside going, hope, 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 and, and you know, and you
and
need
there is none.
Especially you go, well, no, that can't help me. And so if you see someone who's been where you've been and they can help, and that's why I actually love Mighty Oaks so much, because you do, you know, no one's walking around acting like they're perfect, you know, and people do, you know, end up with steps backwards, but they are making the strides, and there's something so foundational here. And, you know, if I was a person on the outside, I'd see that like, whoa, they've been where I've been, you know, they're telling me these things, they're telling me their struggles. And I think to hear someone else's struggle, so I would say one thing, our pain is not even just for us often. And our suffering is not just for us. There's going to be someone else. You're not isolated in this thing. It's not unique to us to suffer. And so I think if we get out of our own way, we do know life will happen to us. And we try to control what we can at the best we can. That's just asking for help, receiving the help, being open, and then allowing ourselves to grow. And how many more people, I think that's a lot of our purpose as people is, you know, we suffer. God never said we wouldn't suffer.
In fact, he said we would.
He did say we would. And he did. And so, and then, you know, and we can walk. The whole idea is walking with others. So this whole piece of isolating, I get so, I'm like, no, don't isolate, you know. And I think, you know, community like Mighty Oaks or having a church family is such a, in any recovery. And, you know, I talk about being a therapist. My goal is for people to not do therapy with me long term, because there's so much, there's so much richness out there with community and church and just relationship, you know. So,
Do you think that is what you just described? Is that the idea of post-traumatic growth? That's become kind of a like a catchphrase. Is that what we're talking about?
Absolutely. It's really understanding that having any type of disorder that can be disruptive or causes us to not be in our norm or baseline. It's just not a badge of honor to walk around with, oh, I have PTSD, so this is why I'm the way I am. And you know, in fact, that post-traumatic growth speaks completely against walking around with that badge of honor. It's like, yeah, I have this. I acknowledge that I'm dealing with this. My goal is growing in this. And a lot of that growth is asking for the help, getting the help, and helping others.
Yeah, that's good.
And so I think that really encompasses all of those areas.
Just that little shift in perspective could help so many people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, people who are just stuck. When you talk to people, hope is so important. You've mentioned it several times. If someone were sitting across from you, maybe as a friend, we won't say as a therapist or a counselor, but as a friend.
Friends, I have that.
And they said, Shannon, I don't want to go on anymore. I've lost hope. The situation I find myself in, this is all there is, there's nothing else. How would you communicate hope to that person?
Honestly, so for me, it would really try to pull for them what's important in their life. Because I can talk all day about hope, but until you attach it to something, it's just really just talking. And so if they have a family, if they have kids, if they have, you know, some friendships, it's like you have a purpose in here, and that's attaching it to something as well. But you have to also hear their perspective. Because we can have the best advice, the best information, but if that person, like I could sit and talk to someone about Christ all day, but if they don't believe, then I'm missing the mark, right? So you always have to get in there and really see what's important to that person, and then you attach hope to that, what's important to them, and then you start building from that, and you allow them to tell you, you know, why is this important to me? What values is so huge? Is it my family? And then if they have a perspective that, well, it'd be better without me.
A lot of people say that.
Absolutely. Then you go, okay, tell me about that. So the biggest thing for me is you can't be scared to talk about even suicide. You got to get in there and like, okay, let's talk about this. You want to, you know, kill yourself. What is that going to do? Oh, people will be better off. Really, let's talk about what that looked like. Let's talk about your children. You know, and I've gone as far, and you know, it can be a little unorthodox, But I've had people go, okay, imagine sitting at your funeral. You took your life. What would people say? You think they're going to be happy?
Yeah.
You think, no. And that leaves such a hole in every single person who is attached to that individual, because it always leaves us thinking, what more could I have done?
Right.
What did I miss? And so it is our responsibility too, if we're the person thinking about, you know, taking our lives or not having hope, or I'm so low, it is a responsibility there too, is to really start seeking the help and not sitting in that piece. But I know you have to attach hope to something that is important to that person.
That's really good. I think often, I ask this question a lot, and I have given answers to that question. But a lot of times it is, this is why you have hope. This is why you should have hope. Just believe me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the idea that you have to attach it to something, to a family, to...
Yes, whatever's important to them. It could be their dog, you know? I mean, realistically, if they love their dog, and it's like, let's talk about that. And, you know, I don't make this small or little at all, but whatever's important to that person. And it might shift a bit, but you really have to find out what that is. And, you know, and I think all of us, to some degree, have something we can attach it to, even if it's so small. You just keep building and building.
That's good.
And and that person then understanding what their purpose is for their life. You know.
Purpose is so important.
It is.
Yeah. You tie that to identity. Without those, there really is no reason to move on.
Absolutely.
Right? If you're missing those two things.
I mean, it makes sense. So you have a person who feels that way. All of this just makes so much sense. You know.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good conversation.
It was.
Yeah.
So,
I really appreciate that.
Me.
What would you tell a woman who is on the fence about going to the Mighty Oaks Women's Legacy Program?
Right.
We've got another one coming up in a month or so.
Right, I think July.
Yeah,
we have one in July.
Right.
Yes.
How do you push them over the fence?
Oh, push them over the fence. I think the biggest part is women feeling like they're alone.
Yeah.
They're the only one.
Yeah.
You know, I'm the only one. And you'll find at Mighty Oaks, the Women's Legacy Program, that you'll find a sisterhood. I don't know what happened with this last group of ladies, but man, they have connected. And even if you're a person who doesn't even like all of that, you'll find that there's not a lot of pressure that you have to do those things. But the richness of the material, the teachings, the foundation of the teachings. I mean, I go every single time. I think I've been going for 3.5 years now, and I learn something every single time. And I sit there and I'm like, because even as a facilitator, we sit through just like everyone else every single time. And there's not a time I'm like, oh, I hear that different. Right. So sometimes like, no, come again. But you know, but know that you're not alone. Know that, you know what.
That's good.
And I always look at, well, if it's not, what are you doing right now? You know, if it's not working, why not try something else? And this could be that different for you.
Just try it. You have nothing to lose.
Oh yeah, you absolutely have nothing to lose at all. You just come out, you sit, you listen. But I really guarantee you though, you won't walk away without learning something.
That's
and you'll
awesome.
And honestly, what I saw and a lot of ladies say is, even if your experiences, I've never seen women who are so true and so loving and so caring, and they are real. And so you don't see this cattiness. It's just women who love women and want to take care of women. And so I say, even if you get that experience, and we find a lot of women who come who don't like women, you know, because they've had really negative experiences with women. And you will come here, and we've had it several times said, like, I've never seen women who really care about you, and you do get that here with Mighty Oaks. So just come try it.
Yeah,
you'll
that's
get
good.
to see me.
So this is my third last question, because I keep asking last questions.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, here's my third last question.
All right.
It's a really unique environment in the women's program because it's about 50-50 spouses and either veterans or active duty service members. Can you just talk about how that works and why it works?
You know, that's always a question. Like, why don't we have one just for veterans?
Yep.
Why don't we have one just for spouses? And I love what has happened here with Mighty Oaks is that this is women, you know, and we talk about, like, we identify ourselves in so many roles, but who we are, women, and this is an opportunity for us to learn from different women, stay foundationally in that, and know that we're not stuck in a role, you know, being a mom, being a Marine, being a sailor, being, you know, a lawyer, all of these things, those are titles. And what happens when those titles go away? You're a woman. And that's the part we really want, and we build upon so much. Good. And so I think that's been, we talk about that right away. Yeah. And I think it's just been so helpful with the program.
I've talked to many directors of organizations similar to Mighty Oaks that don't have women's programs. Yeah. Because women are hard to deal with sometimes. But I love women. I think they're amazing. I love my wife and the 2 women I have in my house, my daughters. But bringing the 2 together, the spouses and the service members, man, it's a challenge that a lot of people don't think could work.
You know, it's been really awesome though. We've had the active duty service members say, I never knew wives dealt with all of this, right? Because they see the Marines or the sailors or the airmen, the Army as their brother, the soldiers as their brothers, and they say, man, I didn't know their wives were at home dealing with all of these things.
Times, right?
And then you see also the spouses go, wow, I didn't know you dealt with that in the military as well. And so it's a really good opportunity that is just so different, this environment, to learn from both and hear. And I love when you hear, I did not know, and how that's growth there. I didn't know that you experienced that, or I had no idea that you experienced that. So I think I think people are missing out when they don't have a women's program. I don't think we're difficult. I think we
No, of course not. You wouldn't.
We're not difficult, but we come really like, okay, what is this about? And I think a lot of it's tied up in fear, you know, because we're at home or we have to leave our children to go somewhere a lot of the times, and so it's like, okay, what is this about? You know?
And is it worth the time?
Is it worth my time leaving my kids, having to make all these arrangements? Because we do find that a lot, you know, of the ladies that come have to make some serious arrangements. And so you want to make sure it's worth your while going somewhere. So
that's good. Yeah, if you're a lady and you fall into the category of spouse, veteran, active duty service members, first responders. We would love for you to come and go to mightyoaksprograms.org. That's our website. A lot of information there, but you can apply right there on the website. Won't cost you anything, and we'll even pay to get you to the location. So
absolutely,
we'd love it.
Yes.
Thank you, Shannon. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And for those of you that are watching, thank you for watching. If you're listening somewhere else, go to YouTube, get on our channel, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. That lets you know when more stuff comes online. We'd love to share that with you. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.